Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're going to permanently demystify a concept that gets thrown around constantly in prop trading, and that is drawdown. Specifically, we're diving into the exact mathematical realities that literally dictate your survival in a challenge. Because let's be real, a lot of traders just kind of nod along when they hear terms like max drawdown limits or breaching drawdown, but privately, they're a little fuzzy on the actual mechanics. Well, by the end of this, you are going to know exactly where you stand before you open a single trade. So, here's our roadmap. We're going to define what drawdown actually means, break down static versus trailing systems with the hard math, do a side-by-side comparison, check out which firms use which, and then wrap up with a daily tracking habit you absolutely need to start using. All right, Section 1, what drawdown actually means. Let's cut through the jargon for a second. At its absolute core, drawdown is just the reduction in your account balance from a specific reference point. The golden rule is simply that your balance cannot fall more than a certain percentage below that mark. But the absolutely critical phrase here is reference point, because how a firm sets that specific point, it changes absolutely everything about your challenge. Moving right along to Section 2, static drawdown explained. You see, there are two totally different types of drawdown. First up, we have static drawdown. You can visualize this one like a massive, immovable concrete foundation right beneath your account. If you start a standard $100,000 challenge with a 10% static maximum drawdown, the math is incredibly straightforward. Your floor is firmly locked at $90,000. That's just your starting balance minus 10%. And here's the absolute beauty of a static drawdown. Whether you trade brilliantly for 3 weeks and bump your account up to $115,000, or you hit a rough patch and drop to $98,000, this reference point never ever moves. It stays locked at $90,000. Earning a profit actually builds up your safety buffer, which makes this system so incredibly forgiving. Which brings us to Section 3, trailing drawdown explained. Now, trailing drawdown works completely differently. Instead of that concrete foundation, I want you to imagine a glass floor on a mechanical elevator that only ratchets upward and it completely lacks a down button. In a trailing system, the reference point isn't your starting balance anymore. It's your highest equity point. So say you hit a new account peak of $112,000, your reference point immediately recalculates based on that brand new high. Bam! Your floor instantly rises to $100,800, which is exactly 10% below your new peak of $112,000. And here's the kicker. If you have a bad week and your account drops back down to, say, $105,000, that floor does not move down with you. It stays completely locked right up there at $100,800. And here is the real shock factor that catches so many traders off guard. If you keep losing and your account hits $100,700, you cross that new floor and your account is closed. Just look at the math there. You started at $100,000, you're currently at $100,700. You're literally still in profit, yet you just failed the challenge. Your own profit created a higher floor that eventually caught up and snapped you. Let's make this even clearer. Section 4, the side-by-side comparison. Seeing these two systems applied to the exact same scenario really illustrates why knowing your reference point is literally a matter of survival. Imagine you start at $100,000, you peak at $112,000, but then you hit a nasty losing streak and drop to $97,000. Under static drawdown, your floor never moved from $90,000. You're still perfectly alive with a $7,000 buffer. But under trailing drawdown, your floor rose to $100,800. By the time your balance dropped to $97,000, your account was already toast. The exact same trade results, but radically different outcomes. Okay, Section 5, which firms use which? Since the stakes are just so incredibly high, you absolutely have to know what you're signing up for. As you can see, firms like FTMO and E8 Markets use the more forgiving static limits. On the flip side, TopStep and Apex Trader Funding use trailing limits. And then you have firms like Funded Next that actually offer both depending on the account. Honestly, if you're choosing your very first challenge, heavily consider static accounts. Not because trailing is impossible, but simply because static seriously reduces your daily cognitive overhead while you're just learning how to pass. All right, final piece of the puzzle. Section 6. How to track your floor. It is absolutely staggering how many traders breach their limits simply because they never bothered to actively track their floor. So we're going to implement what I call the 60-second morning habit. Now, if you're on a static floor, you calculate this once and you know your number forever. Easy. But trailing drawdown accounts require a 60-second recalculation every single Monday morning before you even think about placing a trade. Here is exactly how you build your defense. Step 1. Find last week's highest equity peak. Step 2. Multiply that peak by 0.9. Step 3. I want you to literally write this new floor down on a physical piece of paper right next to your monitor. And step 4. Calculate the exact dollar buffer between that floor and your current account balance. By doing this, you're shifting from blindly hoping you don't breach to having absolute mathematical certainty of their risk parameters. Let's actually apply this real quick. Say your peak was $108,000. You multiply by 0.9 to get your recalculated floor, which is $97,200. If your current balance is $104,000, well, you have a buffer of exactly $6,800. So if you risk 1% per trade, which would be $1,040 at your current balance, you have roughly 6 trades before you hit the floor. Knowing you only have 6 trades of runway completely shifts your mindset, right? You stop being overly aggressive and you start waiting exclusively for those grade A setups. So the ultimate takeaway here comes down to this final question. How much runway does your strategy actually have right now? Before you open a single trade tomorrow morning, I'm challenging you to take 60 seconds to calculate your own floor and your own buffer. Because understanding your real limits and tracking them daily, that is the precise habit that separates the traders who pass from the ones who inexplicably fail. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and trade smart out there.